This is Solomon for Your World News. As the United States and Israel continue to terroristically bomb Iran, unfortunately, a great many Americans continue to believe the narratives, the false narratives and false propaganda that is spewing out of the White House, the Pentagon, the State Department, and yes, the unofficial fourth branch of United States government, the corporate media. The narrative are that the Iranian government, they are the monsters of the world. They are the monsters. They are the monsters that need to be put down like a vicious rabid dog. But nothing could be further from the truth. And a great many Americans are kept in the informational dark by design. They're socially engineered to believe that the United States is the world's great moral authority, that they're the good guys. When in fact, it is the United States, not Iran, who for decades and decades, it is the United States who has gone into other countries and upended and deposed in coup d'etats democratically elected governments, democratically elected leaders. They've also orchestrated and planned and been involved in the assassinations of activists, of organizers, and even leaders of other countries. We even saw earlier this year in 2026, in January of 2026, how the United States government and this regime, it's not a government, it's not an administration, this regime, the United States regime, went into Venezuela and kidnapped the sitting president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, right? And they are still held in a jail cell in New York City. This is the United States. And when we're talking about Iran, it was in 1953 that the democratically elected leader of Iran, Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh, was overthrown by the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States, the CIA, was overthrown, right? Simply because he wanted to ensure that the oil resource, not from the United States, not from Great Britain, but from Iran, benefited the Iranian people first and foremost. He wanted to nationalize the oil resources of his country, that it was in the ground of his country. And because of that, the United States, in cahoots with England, decided to go in there and orchestrate a coup d'etat, and they overthrew him. And then he was replaced by the Shah, by the Shah, who ruled with a brutal, bloody fist for close to 3 decades after that, right? Had the Savak, the secret police in Iran, going and brutalizing and taking out and eliminating, political dissenters left and right in Iran. And the United States, the United States and their intelligence agencies knew about this the whole time, but they didn't give a damn. They didn't give a damn because their oil, not their oil, but the people of Iran's oil was now being largely being controlled by the United States and Great Britain. This is the legacy of the United States. And unfortunately, many, many Americans don't know this. So when the narratives are put in place by the corporate media, they believe those narratives, lock, stock, and barrel. They believe those narratives, and they walk around and they parrot like mindless zombies and parrot the narratives that have been put out there by the U.S. government, the lying U.S. government, and the corporate media. If Iran did a fraction of the evil things that the United States regime has done over the past several decades, we might have a different conversation. But in 1953, we just discussed, but even 1 year later, in Guatemala, the United States government overthrew Jacobo Arbenz. 1973 means something completely different. 9/11 in Chile, 1973 means something completely different to Chileans, because in 1973, it was the United States government that went in and they orchestrated the overthrow of Salvador Allende and replaced him with a brutal, devilish dictator known as Augusto Pinochet. This is what the United States has done. They have bombed country after country. They've bombed Iraq. They've bombed Panama. They've invaded Grenada. They have done all kinds of wretched things throughout the past several decades. And the fact that so many Americans do not know this and see all these countries, these other countries, as the boogeyman and not their own government means that far too many Americans are taking their eyes off the ball in terms of placing the requisite pressure in terms of protesting and organizing to change the demographic of the United States and shift it to something that is much, much, much more humane. But as long as Americans are kept in the dark, most Americans are not on the boots on the ground organizing, protesting. And therefore it's left to a small critical mass that is trying to do that work. The Trump administration, in regard to Iran, has lied and lied and lied again and lied again. Number one, when we look at the Trump administration, Donald Trump ran on a platform, right? No more endless wars. No more endless wars. That he was going to be the president that's going to end these endless wars. And what has he done? What has he done in his second administration? He's bombed several countries already, a little over a year into his second administration. Several countries have been bombed. He's kidnapped the sitting president, and looks like his goals are to race forward and to push the United States into a third world war, a third world war, which could be the war to end all wars, because we're talking about nuclear armament and we're talking about the potential end of the planet if that goes through. Iran may continue to end up being another endless war. We look at the fact that over 153 schoolgirls were killed at the hands of the United States and Israeli governments. Where is the discussion about them? Where is it? I turn to the U.S. media, right? I turn to the corporate media, and you look at whether it's CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or ABC. There was virtually no coverage discussing the brutal, barbaric murdering, bombing, and elimination of over 150 schoolgirls in a school that was bombed in Iran. Where is the outrage? Where is the outrage? None whatsoever. And so what we have done at Your World News, we have put together a collage of different voices, of activists, of journalists, geopolitical analysts, organizers who are very well respected. The vast majority of Americans may not know of them, but they should know of them, and they should know of the organizations they represent, and should try to find ways to engage themselves and ingratiate themselves with those organizations. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this piece, is to get information out there that, quite frankly, is not out there right now, that is being suppressed or being marginalized. And we're trying to do our part in terms of getting this information out there to spread it and proliferate it so that Americans in a democratic manner can know about this information and hopefully do their own research and learn about the history of Iran, what is going on, what has been going on in this country, before they speak foolishly about things that they don't know about, and foolishly carrying out narratives and lies that have been fed to them and have been socially and engineered and woven and fed to them by the corporate media, by the Pentagon, by the White House, by the State Department, and the like. And so as you watch this, please, if you appreciate this work, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. But please get this, most importantly, get this information, get this video out there far and wide. It is not hyperbolic for me to say that literally having more and more Americans vastly informed about these types of critical issues that are going on at the behest of, quote unquote, their own government, the United States government. The world and humanity depend on it. The world and humanity depend on it. We've just seen the United States finance a genocide. Without the United States direct financing to the apartheid state of Israel, the genocide that we've seen going on over the past couple years and the brutal apartheid that's been going on for the last several decades in Greater Palestine likely would never have happened without the direct financing and direct help from the United States government. I could go on and on. I can talk about the Congo and Patrice Lumumba and how the United States government directly helped orchestrate with the Belgians to assassinate Patrice Lumumba, the leader of the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, 1960. And so I could go on and on, but it's on us. It's on everyone that's watching this. Even if you're watching this outside of U.S. borders, this is extremely important. We're dealing with a megalomaniac government, United States government, and if this was a human being, if the United States government and what they're doing was labeled as a human being, was assessed like a human being by a psychologist, right? They would likely be diagnosed and assessed as a sociopath. Sociopaths have the ability to go and kill without any consciousness, without any kind of consciousness or conscience of their actions. We talk about these horror movies, with Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees. I mean, if you watch one of those movies, they might kill 10 people. Well, the United States and its sycophants, they kill in a fell swoop hundreds upon hundreds or thousands upon thousands of human beings, and have done so military campaign after military campaign after military campaign. So why aren't they labeled as a mass murderer, as a sociopath? They should be labeled as a sociopath. And those of us and those of you that want to see a better world, a world that is replete with justice, social justice, humanity, and peace, it's upon us, it's upon you to speak out and to organize and to demand an end to imperialism as we know it. Again, I'm Solomon for Your World News, the place where journalism and activism are not mutually exclusive. I hope you enjoy the information that is here, and I hope you find the information that is within this video extremely important and important enough to spread to your friends, your family, and all your networks far and wide. Thank you. Until next time, peace.
این خوشحالی حمله به ایرانه؟
اصلا نمیخوایم وحشی‌ها رو ببینم. اینجا تهران روز 6 جنگه.
بعید میدونم ایرانی باشن.
مادر و پدر و فامیل خودت دارن تو این کشور زندگی میکنن.
ایرانی هم؟
آره.
نمیدونم اینا دلشون به کی خوشه.
اینا یه آدمای بیشور و نفهمی هستن، آدم فروشن، هم وطن فروشن.
آدمای کثیف.
هر فشاری که رومونه از منافقین و مزدورای داخلیه. یکی مثل اینایی که تو کشورهای دیگه نشستن، خوشیاشون رو دارن، شعار اینو میدن که ما وطن پرستیم.
ما ایرانیم، اینا دارن 170 تا دانش آموز رو میکشن، اینا دارن مردم ایران رو میکشن.
وطن پرستون کسایی هستن که شبای سرد تو خیابونا میان برای جمهوری اسلامی، برای سوگ پدرشون اینجا به جماعت نشستن. انتظار داری کشوری که برای هیچ کس آبادانی به ارمغان نیاورده برای شما بیاره؟ چرا همچین فکری رو میکنی؟
Boots on the ground in Iran. Are you afraid of a U.S. invasion in your country?
No, we are waiting for them.
You are waiting for the U.S. military to invade the ground troops?
Yes, because we are confident that we can confront them, and that would be a big disaster for them.
So you're saying that Iran is ready and willing to take on the U.S. military if there were to be ground troops?
Well, we were ready for this war even more than the previous war. So you can see, the quality of our missiles, how much they are upgraded after the last war, because we learned lots of lessons. And we are prepared for any other eventuality, even, a ground invasion. So our soldiers are prepared for any scenario. When I said that we are waiting for them, it didn't mean that we are waiting for continuation of the war. No, but we have prepared ourselves to confront with any scenario. with any eventuality, any possibility, and we know that we can handle that.
Are your allies Russia and China helping you?
Well, they are supporting us politically and otherwise.
My name is Netfa Freeman. I'm on the Coordinating Committee of the Black Alliance for Peace, and I'm a member of the member organization Pan-African Community Action based in Washington, D.C. The fact that it has a right, that people have the right to, to defend whatever they have, their government, their culture, their nation, and the United States should not have any right to dominate it, try to dominate it. And I think we should understand, as people who are objects or subjects or targets, really, of this settler colonial project, this imperialist project, is that our struggle is with the people of Iran and other people of the global South struggling against imperialism and capitalism and white supremacy and patriarchy. And that that being one struggle, then we have to take up that fight, because it's the same enemy. And we have to understand that this is an enemy, and we say it's an enemy of humanity. And so while they exert military control in other places, that's what they use, the military and hegemonic and invasion and war in other places. Within domestically within the U.S., they use the police, they use militarized police, and in fact, the excess equipment that they have from their militaries that they use abroad, they bring it back here and use this in the United States, and this is exorbitant amounts, tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars that they spend on invasion, on death, on destruction. It's even become an industrial complex, and to the neglect of struggling and suffering people. And then that money that they use for that, they appropriated rather from the people, through taxes or whatever, and through our labor, the exploitation of our labor.
I'm Danny Shaw, professor at the City University of New York. I was fired 2 years ago because I spoke out against the ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people. The war in Iran began in 1979 with the triumph of the Islamic Revolution, which is replete with contradictions that we should examine. For example, the suppression of the Kurds and in the left, but that's not why the U.S. Under Donald Trump and Marco Rubio is invading and bombs away on the masses of this ancient civilization, which has been around for thousands and thousands of years. This is an all-out war on Iran's sovereignty, on their natural resources, together with Venezuela. This is one of the richest oil-rich countries in the world. This is white supremacy, neocolonialism on full display, and shame on all these European countries who've jumped into the fray to onto the bandwagon to support this imperial war. But the 8.5 billion people of the world really know that Iranian resistance is global resistance, because yesterday it was Palestine, today it is Iran, and tomorrow it could be China, Vietnam, Cuba, or any other country.
I'm Jacqueline Luqman. I am an organizer with the Black Alliance for Peace, and I'm also a member of the Board of Social Action for my church, Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ in Washington, D.C. Well, because I'm an anti-imperialist first and foremost, so I oppose all imperialist war, I oppose imperialism, and I oppose capitalism and Zionism that undergird this particular war, but that is really behind all of the global unrest that we have been experiencing and living through, not just for the past few years, but for centuries, quite honestly. What is going on in Iran right now is just the latest iteration of imperialist, settler colonial, Zionist antagonism for profit. It is conquest for profit. It is war for oil, but it's also conquest and war for geopolitical control of an entire region by the imperialist Zionist coalition of the United States and Israel. So, yes, I oppose the subversion of every country's sovereignty and every people's right to self-determination that is supplanted by the pedophile class in the United States and Israel right now, under the claim that Iran is run by a group of religious fanatics, but it is the Christo-fascist pedophile class in the U.S. and Israel who are behind all of this.
I'm Yuri Smouter. My name is Yuri Smouter. I'm based in southern Belgium, and I host a current affairs history program from a left-wing perspective called 1+1. I mean, the easiest short answer is that it's Western imperialism, and it's a humongous, how should I say, crime against humanity if we allow both the U.S. and Israel to wage aggressive war against the sovereign country of the Islamic Republic of Iran. That would be the easiest shortest answer. And then the other main answer is that this really is an unjust war, regardless of whatever one thinks about the Islamic Republic of Iran, and whatever legitimate grievances, if you are of the Iranian diaspora, that you have with the Islamic Republic of Iran. It is not. We simply cannot consent to the United States and Israel, which are both settler colonial countries, nuclear armed countries, which have so many injustices going on within their borders that who are they to wage war on the Islamic Republic of Iran, especially when all of the reasons they are waging an aggressive war is all based on deception and half-truths at best.
And why are you unafraid to speak out against this?
Because I think the more the reason why I'm unafraid to speak out against this is because if you just know basic history of the United States and its proxy Israel, you know that they are the leading terrorist states. They are the ones that house the United States specifically houses more people in prisons, majority of them for non-violent drug offenses. A majority of there's some research into the United States that your viewers and listeners should know, that most of the humongous crime bills that we think are used against murderers, serial killers, people who engage in kidnapping and pedophilia, most of those crimes that we think people are incarcerated in and that forever they're blacklisted in, most of those people are not have not even done those crimes. So for a country like that to find flaws with the Islamic Republic of Iran and say that we have the right to overthrow your government, violate your sovereignty, it baffles the mind.
My name is Gus Griffin, and I'm a member of the Ujima People's Progress Party of Maryland, the only Black-led working class party in the state of Maryland. I'm also a member of the Black Alliance for Peace Africa team. And I got one more in here, I think. One more. Oh, the Faculty for Justice in Palestine, several others. Last one, the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition. So I'll leave it at that. Well, because I'm opposed to imperialism. And this is just another example of imperialism. The only distinction in my mind is that it's just a bit more naked, maybe, than has been the case in maybe the last 50 years or so since the 1940s. But it's U.S. imperialism. And you might say it, maybe some of these naked behaviors is an indication of its desperation, hopefully in its last days. But that's why I'm opposed to it. Iran has a right to decide on its own fate, the people in Iran, on its own initiative, its own collective will, what kind of government they want. And if they decide to keep the current government, that's their business. If they decide to get rid of it, that's their business, though. It's not, no other country external influence should have any role.
Well, I think it's obvious. It's because it's wrong. It is an absolute, illegal war of oppression, aggression, neo-colonialism, and imperialism. It is part of the American kind of juggernaut that, Trump aside, is just the latest wave of everything that we've seen on the part of the Americans for the last 100 years or so, 85, certainly Americans since the end of the Second World War, but Anglo-Americans for another 500 years before that. This is the half a millennium of degradation, invasion, repression that has taken place in the world around. And now this is just the latest installment. And it's unbelievably ugly. That's the thing, that people start talking about the Constitution, you talk about parties and this and that and all this crap. Like these are the people who bombed a school full of girls on the first day. And then have the guts to come around. And this is where Trump's psychosis really does come into focus, because it does sound like you're listening to a toddler, saying that maybe it was theirs, maybe, anyone can have tomahawks, like just crazy sounding stuff. And of course, the difference is that it's always been crazy to be the mouthpiece for this bullshit. Right? It has always been a touch of insanity, hubris, and self-love or loathing of others, that you could be that mouthpiece. And he's really bad at it. He sounds just straight up. He just sounds crazy. He sounds exactly like it is, like an out of control maniac, a toddler having a tantrum. And that's exactly what the West is going through as their empire's demise, as they circle the drain, basically. You have pseudo leftists now and kind of Democrat adjacent activists who are trying to, what I call, butt Hamas. People said the TDS, remember the Trump derangement syndrome? I think we should start a new one. This is BHS, but Hamas syndrome. And this is the uncanny ability to destroy your own credibility immediately by referring to something that is acceptable to make the truth something you can actually say. But Hamas, no, it's a genocide. It's a genocide. It's what it is. It's what it's always been. There's no excuse. There's no secondary thing. But the so-called left are trying to butt Hamas this by saying Iran's a terrible regime. First of all, you're wrong. You don't know that. You don't know anything. And you have to listen and read. There's 6,000 years of history here. You, with your 250 years of wah, rah, rah, red, white, and blue popcorn crap, maybe need a little bit of humility and perspective to understand. The other thing is that I think people need to know is that getting rid of Trump doesn't do it. I think we're at a point now where this is crazy. We are crazy. This man is in charge. His party and the neocons and Zionists associated with it are ruining the country and the world, and they have to be opposed. I think it's silly to say that, well, it's all Trump's fault. So, I mean, or Trump isn't is just, the other wing of the war party, blah, 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 blah. Fine, but he's in power, and you have to oppose the power that is right now in order to reset it. You can deal with the Democrats some other time. But I will say also that they do not deserve and will not will not achieve the majorities that they think they're entitled to somehow by being un-Trump. They have to oppose the war state, the imperialism, the carceral state, the idea that you can have might rule. And that is something that is just off the page when it comes to internal electoral politics in this country. They were wrong to go into the war against Russia. They just completely ignored the fact that this was a coup in 2014, that this is an outgrowth of leave-behinds, you know, from the Second World War, from the coddling and funding of Nazis in Western Ukraine for a generation. And so that's what that war is actually about. Now, this war is the same thing. It's the same thing. And people have to learn to trust that that page is what it is, because it hasn't changed. They haven't changed the typeset, Solomon. They haven't changed a single thing in their script. And it should be opposed from the left, if you even want to call it the left anymore. This has to move in the direction of the people. This is where the people are by huge majorities and have supported these domestic policies like, you know, healthcare and education, reasonable treatment of people, the acceptance of the other. All of that is just groundwork. It's Christian, it's socialist, even communist, if you do it right. And you can call it left, but it's where people are. And so people have to, you have to wear, it's like, you know, Lamar Burton with the silly ocular thing that he had in
Star Trek.
You know, that you're filtering, you have to have an air filter on your head and on your eyes to leave that out. And just go with your gut and go what is reasonable. Yes, people agree with the things that help people. Duh. You don't have to get expert opinions from the people who are running the Democratic Party, for example. Because truth is truth. It doesn't change. And if you plug in, it's kind of tiresome at this point. Because you plug in the jigsaw puzzle, the pieces, and you say, holy shit, that looks just like it has always looked. We're in the same position. We're on the side of right and the side of history.
That's right.
And this is just another page. But I don't want to sound glib. As an American, we are responsible for conducting this vicious, sick war. And the language that comes out of it is so repulsive. Of that's macho crap that Pete Keg's breath, whatever his name is, you know, I mean, it's repulsive.
Sure, I'm Margaret Kimberley. I'm executive editor. I'm executive editor of blackagendareport.com. I'm also a member of the Black Alliance for Peace and the United National Anti-War Coalition. It's a war of aggression. It's a war that violates international law, that violates the Nuremberg laws. It's a war that is meant to expand U.S. hegemony along with its partner Israel, in order to wage this war. Who is the U.S. to claim the entire world? The U.S. feels it can kidnap the president of Venezuela and starve people in Cuba and have a proxy war against Russia in Ukraine and help Israel murder people in Gaza and help Israel. And there are other forces, not just Israel, to take control of Iran, to control this oil-rich country, to undermine China, to undermine the Palestinian cause. Iran, actually, its constitution states that the country is obliged to help the Palestinian resistance struggle. So any reason to destroy this state it has to be something that is bad for humanity, that is bad. They bombed an oil refinery in Iran. It literally rained oil on the city of Tehran, a city, the capital of 9 million people, polluting that country. And of course, this cloud will move and it will pollute neighboring countries. But this is the end result of the U.S. trying to deny self-determination under international law, under the UN Charter. Nations have the right to sovereignty, the right to self-determination, and the right to self-defense. And all of those rights that were agreed upon by the world are being violated by the US, and inevitably you have thousands of people being killed. A girls' school, 100-something, around 165 people killed, almost all of them little children killed. And that's just an example. Bragging about sending a torpedo. An Iranian naval ship had participated in exercises in India, and the U.S. Sank the boat with no right but bragged about it. Actually bragged about having done it. So those are the sorts of things: bombing schools, killing sailors on a ship that was defenseless. They couldn't participate in the exercise unless it was undefended. So they knew it was undefended. And so all of that is inevitable. All of these are war crimes. And to make a long story short, these are war crimes. That is, I shouldn't have to say war crimes are wrong, right? War crimes are illegal. But unfortunately, the US and Israel have been given impunity. So all of these laws and rules that I mentioned are ignored, have been ignored for a long time. And that is why they know they can get away with waging war, but we shall see. I don't think they thought through every element. This idea that they could bomb the country, assassinate the head of state, the supreme leader, Khamenei, and that would be a decapitation strike and it would all fall apart, which obviously is untrue. They don't even know what they're talking about. So that's not possible. You cannot end the Iranian state without destroying the country, without killing people, without destroying infrastructure. But that's what they want. They want to destroy Iran. And I want to add also, it's not just Israel. There are forces in the United States who have long wanted to destroy the state of Iran ever since the Islamic Revolution 47 years ago.
Margaret, thank you. Margaret, unfortunately, there's a lot of Americans that believe whatever narrative comes out of the Pentagon, the State Department, the White House, the corporate media. Would you say that the United States is the monster that they describe other countries as, a la Venezuela, a la Cuba, a la Iran? Are they the brutal war criminal, like greatest threat to humanity and peace in the world? And if so, why?
Well, Iran calls the U.S. the Great Satan, and I can't argue with that. The U.S. has, for the last 30 years, since the end of the Cold War, has, in the unipolar world, the U.S. has gotten its way all over the globe. The U.S., just look at that region. The U.S. has destroyed the states of Libya, of Syria, of Iraq, has gotten rid of the axis of resistance, so that there is, and of course, as these dominoes fall, their desire to keep going, not to say we've done enough. We snatched Maduro from Venezuela. We've got a gun to their head. We're controlling their economy. That's enough, right? No, it's not enough. So China buys Venezuela's oil, so you make sure China doesn't have Venezuela oil. So China buys oil from Iran, and then you make sure you destroy Iran and their oil production capabilities, and you make sure China can't do that either. There is no other country with 800 military bases around the world, no other country which uses its veto power at the United Nations to act against the interests of humanity. No other country that has the ability of reducing the number of nuclear weapons in the world. Every treaty the US has had, first with the Soviet Union and then Russia, every nuclear weapons treaty has been allowed to expire. There's one left, and this has been going on ever since George W. Bush was president. So the US has the power to destroy the entire world, and all over the world claims a right to do whatever it wants, to control whom it wants, to control what it wants. So this idea that there's this, I mean, it's projection, right? That's what they call it in psychology, or it's the saying every accusation is a confession. It's the United States that is committing acts of evil in the world.
Why do you continue to speak out? A lot of folks are shy away from speaking out, especially in regard to the involvement of Israel. We're looking at Gaza, Palestine, and what's been going on there for the last several decades, and the U.S.'s involvement in this military campaign of aggression. Why are you so unafraid to speak out? Why do you find it important to do so?
I think those are two different questions, being unafraid and being important to do it. So whether I was afraid or not, that wouldn't diminish the importance of doing so, whether people are afraid or not. And sometimes we got to control, whatever, fears we have and muster up the courage. And to me, courage doesn't mean that the absence of fear. It means that maybe the control of it, despite, the circumstances. I think it's important for all of us, just for the reasons that we said before. An injustice in this case, and the fight and the struggle for humanity has to be spoken. They are the system that exerting the ruling class, that's exerting its control around the world, also does so through misinformation and through the media and through just all forms of psychological warfare to get the masses to buy in to what they're doing, to actually think that we hold the same interests that our interests are the same as their interests. And so the only way to combat the confusion and get the masses of the people and the people to see reality for what it is and get them to see reality for what it is and then act upon that and change their behavior upon that, we have to speak out. And we have to find a myriad of ways to do so. It's not just speaking out, but it's finding media communications outlets to amplify our voice, or even if it's just, when I say communications outlets, I'm not even not talking about walking around and handing a flyer to somebody and talking to them. We got to do whatever we can, and we have to use whatever means to our disposal. Because one thing I think that if we're afraid of what the enemy does and what it levels against us, those who speak out, we should be even more afraid of the consequences of not doing so. I think that the enemy, these ruling classes that are bent on war and will even flirt with nuclear war with other powers that are really just trying to exercise, multilateral relationships and whatnot, that it becomes an existential threat, to the existence of humanity and the planet. And that we should be concerned about that. I guess fear, maybe I'm, reluctant to use fear because sometimes fear can be so paralyzing. And so we have to, at least muster up the courage to really see the future, that we have to, be able to control the future and make sure that this monstrous beast is really, is a layover from, just the successors of colonialism and whatnot, and how it manifests today in neocolonialism and domination and military aggression, doesn't destroy this world. It's going to destroy the world. I think, that's the end result if we don't, if we fail to act.
I spoke from the heart, the same way my mother taught me how to speak. When I was coming up, I have the Irish legacy that runs through my veins of fighting colonialism since 1191. The ongoing Irish freedom struggle would never turn its back on the Palestinians, on the Lebanese, on all this different resistance, because when they attack one, they attack us all. And if more people hadn't lived under this dictatorship of fear, which dominates us here in the U.S. and across the West, more Palestinians would certainly be alive today. So many people have turned their backs on Palestine, and that's unacceptable.
As a Pan-African, as a devout Pan-African, why is this important?
I'm Pan-Africanist because I see that, African people of African descent everywhere on the continent of Africa or anywhere else, have a particular relationship to the world, or, how things unfold, the evolution of society. And we have to be organized in order for our role in that world to take fruit, to actually be a contribution to humankind. Because of that, then as a Pan-Africanist, it's important to make a contribution, anti-imperialist contribution. Being a Pan-Africanist means it has to mean being anti-imperialist. It has to mean being anti-capitalist. It has to mean being internationalist to the extent that we're not only concerned with African people, but we're concerned with broader humanity. We're part and parcel of broader humanity. And for us to be concerned about our own people, to know that our upliftment, as a collective upliftment as a people, depends on also being against systems like capitalism that concentrate wealth and power in the hands of a few. That's antithetical to the collective upliftment of African people. And imperialism, which internationalizes this capitalist paradigm, is an impediment to African people as well as global collective humanity.
Well, the same treatment meted out to Iran is meted out against us. I mean, domestically, the mass incarceration system that targets Black people specifically, an economic system that targets us specifically. We talk about gentrification and all sorts of other things. We are targeted by the state, targeted by capitalism. Black people all over the world, you mentioned Pan-Africanism, are targeted by imperialism, are driven to leave their countries. And now the United States says, no, you have to get out. They don't even want to use cheap labor, as was the case in the past, and are using unlawful. I mean, but under American law, almost everything ICE is doing is illegal. And judges keep saying so. None of them will pull that trigger and find the president of the United States in contempt like they ought to. But at any rate, and everything I just described, the U.S. does to African people on the African continent with AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command. The U.S. just divided up the world into these command structures and said, we're going to control this here and that there. We see countries like Cuba, which has a large African population, trying to undo that revolution. The same is true in Venezuela. Cuba had a large medical brigade system. They are forcing nations in the Caribbean basin to end that relationship and send these doctors and nurses back to Cuba. They're threatening these countries with sanctions, threatening them with the Maduro treatment, threatening them with all. The U.S. has the power, unfortunately, to do great damage, threatening to keep their people out of the country. That's a big problem. Because it's this very it's a vicious circle. So imperialism makes countries weak and poor. They have to send people out to the United countries like the U.S., send money back home. It was very, very damaging economically if the U.S. says your people can't come to the United States anymore. Military pressure, economic pressure against Black people all over the world. And there are people who are confused. They seem to think we're going to get some kind of just deal here domestically when the United States is running roughshod over the rest of the world. If the U.S. is running roughshod over people in Iran, it's going to run roughshod over people in New York and Chicago and Baltimore and Los Angeles, etc.
Because what is being done to Iran is what has been done to African peoples, what has been done to indigenous peoples by the same imperialist ideologies, but represented by different countries. The major empire that we are familiar with that carried out the settler colonialism of the 19th century was at first Britain, the great quote unquote British empire that carved up not just the continent of Africa without the consent of African people in any of the countries, but they also did the same thing to Asia and to other countries. So we are familiar with the ideology behind what is being done in Iran because it's the same ideology that was behind the colonization of Africa, the colonization of Asia, the attacks on an anti-imperialist or anti-capitalist countries in Europe and in the global South. And as people who have experienced the oppression of a capitalist invasion and occupation, we understand that the attacks against Iran have nothing to do with the claims against the country that come from the attacking forces, the claims of religious psychopathy, of the wholesale oppression and even mass murder of women. These are things that this regime in this country carry out. So this regime has no standing, moral, political, or otherwise, to condemn any other country of violating any kinds of standards of human norms when this country holds the descendants of Africans forced here to be enslaved, continues to hold the descendants of those people in domestic colonies under brutal military occupation and oppression and economic devastation. So what is being done to Iran is being done to us here in a different way. We may not be being bombed like Iran is, but we have absolutely been imposed, have had economic sanctions imposed on our communities. Our freedom of movement has been restricted by this regime, not just under Trump, but also under every regime before him. If we just look at the period of time immediately before this war, when Israel and the US carried out genocide and are still carrying out genocide in Gaza, what did this regime do to the people, students and citizens alike, who protested the genocide in Gaza, locked people up, expelled students from school, stopped or revoked their diplomas, blackballed them from getting jobs after they graduated if they participated in any activity expressing opposition to the genocide in Palestine, in Gaza. So the things this regime, the US government, has accused Iran and every other country of being in regard to repressing their citizens, this regime has done the same and worse. And this is not to say that there are no contradictions in other countries. Every country has contradictions. But the point is, the people in those countries are responsible for dealing with the contradictions in those countries. That's what self-determination and sovereignty are. That's what they're for, so that the people within their countries can engage with their governments to solve their own problems and not have those issues adjudicated by outside foreign entities whose purpose for being involved in other countries' business is never to free the people or actually address any internal contradictions, but the reason is always conquest and profit for the theft of the resources of those people that belong to those people in those countries at the expense of all of those people. So yes, I'm absolutely opposed to that as an African, because I know that this is what was done to the continent and our people. I know the damage genetically, emotionally, the destruction of tradition, economically, and in a national sense, the lack of cohesion and unity and the continued destabilization that a people are subjected to when they are attacked by imperialist forces. We know what that leads to. We know what that produces. So, as an African and a Pan Africanist, understanding that we are still fighting this colonial, neo-colonial, imperialist, Zionist battle for the liberation of our people, of course we are opposed to this same kind of warfare being unleashed upon other groups of people. When we say freedom for one means freedom for all, we mean
Well,
that.
because it has no boundaries. And the bottom line is, if you see it, and there's a phrase from I think it was from the Nazi era. They came for this guy and you didn't stand up because you weren't that guy. I'm paraphrasing. They came for another. You've heard it many times. And then when they came for you, there's nobody to defend you. The bottom line is this capitalistic imperialistic system is it's a parasite, and it's going to eat all it can until it is dismantled. And that includes whether it's Iran and the Iranian people, whether it's Africa and all of the African people, whether it's Latin America. It's going to eat up everything it can until we stop it. And so the fact that this today it's at Iran doesn't mean it's not going to be expanding in Africa, because it's already in Africa. But it doesn't mean it's not going to be expanding in Africa or at the next door, at the doorstep of those of us Africans here in the United States. So, touch one, touch them all, so to speak. And that's my reasoning for feeling this is just as important as any other issue that is attack on basically working class and predominantly African and indigenous people.
Well, the United States, being a settler colonial country where the indigenous people are still brutally subjected, most of they've been dispossessed of most of their land, and most Black people and folks who are descendants of slavery are still not even met their basic human rights. They are the most incarcerated people when it comes to the life expectancy and how much police brutality there is against our people. This country, which has never ever been held to account for those crimes against humanity, they just simply have no right to be waging war against other people's countries. And then when you talk about Israel, I mean, Israel, not only Israel's crimes against humanity towards the indigenous Palestinians people does not end in historic Palestine. Israel has been a partner in crimes to the U.S., overthrowing various democratically elected governments from Latin America to the continents of Africa and to also West Asia itself, where they are more interested in sowing brutal divisions and chaos than actually, building a just world with their neighbors and much of humanity.
And lastly, as a veteran journalist, activist, and organizer, what needs to be done to end this imperialist military aggression in Iran, against Iran, and imperialism writ large in general?
Mm-hmm. We have to be steadfast, and we have to become, very critical in our messaging as journalists and those involved in disseminating information. We have to make sure we arm the people or fortify the people with an understanding of the complexity and the context of things like what's happening against Iran by the United States and Israel, that particularly historical context, because that is the main way that the enemies of humanity confuse the masses of the people when they put out propaganda and everything that they put out. It's to confuse and obscure the complexity and historical context of situations. So that's one thing that we have to deal with. And then we also have to put out information that helps people understand say the class struggle aspect of things. And so we're not confused by things like, for example, the Iranian people who they show who are cheering this on, right? If we understand the class nature of things, we know that there are always going to be some Iranian people cheering it on. There's going to be some Cuban people cheering the blockade against Cuba on. There's going to be people of these places cheering it on, and we can't be confused enough to allow them to put something in our face that really can represent a minority, and also just not only a minority, but devoid of any context of any dynamics around what role they play within the advancement of their countries, their nations, and the world. And so we have to have, so I just to sum that up, in terms of communications and journalists or anyone trying to put out messaging and to, awaken people, we have to be aware of our messaging, including unpacking the complexity, dealing with the complexity and the historical context and the class struggle.
To end imperialism is going to be a David versus Goliath, or an army of Goliaths, as we say in Haiti. We are certainly outmatched militarily. Trump is bragging now they're going to go after Cuba next. It's like a domino effect, and it makes you wonder at what point they're going to try to take over all of China, which could truly ignite a type of world war. This is still very much regionalized with the people of Western Asia. They're the ones that are truly suffering. What can we do but keep organizing and raising consciousness and prepare for the cataclysmic, catastrophic tragedies that capitalism creates, and wait for opportune movements to keep organizing and fighting back? But we're definitely going to need international solidarity and help. The vast majority of people across the divided snakes of America right now are just that. They're polarized, they're divided, they're getting ready to vote for Tweedledee or Tweedledum. This Holocaust, this colonial Holocaust against the people of Gaza and Palestine began under Biden. So whether it's a Dixiecrat or a fascist Republican, one is left to ask, what is the real difference nowadays? I think it's important to remember that we are the vast, vast majority, the global 99%. But unfortunately, the billionaire class, with Trump as their chief spokesperson right now, these fascists are the ones that have a stranglehold over AI, over technology, over the drones. They have a $1.5 trillion Pentagon budget right now. So they have a monopoly. And in order for us to foresee a future, a bright future, a future where every Cuban and every Venezuelan and every Persian and Palestinian can eat and live in abundance as they should, it's going to take a lot of steadfastness and patience and some type of seismic events that we can't foresee right now, because from the perspective of progressives or internationalists or Marxists, it does appear to be the end of history, in the sense that they are taking out one by one every anti-imperialist state that still exists.
This current conflict is going to have to end through, I think, several different levers have to come together in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before. And I'm not entirely sure we in the United States are organized well enough to pull off, but I'm hoping that we will be able to do it. I mean, this conflict will come to an end. The war will end one way or another. But if the people are to have a say in when the conflict ends, people are going to have to do more direct action at the levers of the distribution of the weapons, which means that we are going to have to find out where the weapons are being manufactured. We're going to have to find out where the supply chains are. We're going to have to confront the actual levers and avenues of production and distribution of this weaponry to clog up the machinery of the delivery of the weapons. That is one thing that is necessary to be done, because we as a people, we do not have the kind of financial or economic power to disrupt their supply chain through a boycott. Do you understand? So we're going to have to do direct action in a different way. And we've seen this carried out by Palestine Action in the UK with their targeting of Elbit systems. And we see the Palestinian youth movement in the United States and also in the UK expanding that fight directly against the weapons manufacturers. That is one thing that is going to have to be done. We're also going to have to carry out direct action at the locations where material is literally shipped from the United States to the theater of war. So I do think this means direct actions blocking access to ports and trains and airports and all of these things. And of course, the Iranian people will continue to resist. And then there are other levers or avenues within the government that are going to have to materialize. You know, Trump is doing this, I think, for money. I don't think Trump had a material reason to do this. I think he was convinced to this. And this is not a defense of Trump. This is just recognizing that ideologically, the only thing the man is concerned about is lining his own pockets. So the access to Iranian oil is certainly his motivation, but regime change in Iran is pretty much not what he wants to do because he doesn't care. All he wants is access to the oil to make the money. So for him, I think he's probably already looking for a way out of this because it is uncomfortable for him. He's losing support among his base. But also, he has an enormous ego and he doesn't want to look bad. So I think he is at an impasse as to who he listens to now. But this is becoming uncomfortable for him very quickly because this is not the clear-cut America first victory that he claimed it would be. And that I think he was kind of convinced by people like Pete Hegseth and Lindsey Graham and Benjamin Netanyahu, who tried to convince him that this would be quick and easy and it would be a quick win for the pedophile coalition. So I think Trump is looking for a way out of this, but I don't think he's going to get it very quickly because there's no reason for Iran to negotiate with this regime now, seeing the complicity of the action when the action was carried out in the middle of negotiations, which were going well. So the people have to be much more organized and committed in focusing on targets that directly feed the conflict to create choke points so that literally the weapons don't get there. That is, I don't think we are at the point where we can ignore that is something that has to happen. Everything else that has to happen, and I think that is our responsibility. Everything else that has to happen for this war to end has to happen in avenues that we do not control. We can advocate, we can assess, and we can analyze. But our job has to be the what do I want to call it? We have to be the brick in the cog of the war machine. We have to do that. That is our only job. That is our only focus. And if we do not do it, then we cannot say that we did everything we could to end this war.
It's interesting that you asked that. I really do honestly believe that we need to step our game up. To be honest with you, I'm actually quite really shocked at how much pro-war sentiment there is, and how much of and how much of the Iranian diaspora are either pro-military action or they support economic terrorism, economic sabotage, what's colloquially called sanctions. And I believe that we have to protest. We need the kind of protests that we saw against the inter-imperial wars of World War I, the aggression, the destruction of Vietnam, and the protests against the Second Iraq War. We need to protest and protest like hell. Let our officials know that we are mad as hell, and if there is a country that is demanding freedom, that's demanding our solidarity, it's historic Palestine. The Islamic Republic of Iran does not need Western. It doesn't need the white man's burden, if you know what I mean.
$1 million question. And at the risk of being accused of being too broad and not specific enough, it really is a matter of just increasing our political education game. Because until we can change a critical mass of the public's mind, their behavior is not going to change. Now, I think it's beginning to go in that direction. I think the stage of capitalism we're in, that it's just indicating things that even people who were maybe kind of similarly endorsement of it, they have to re-question their thinking. And so that's good. That's good. The more people are starting to question capitalism than at any time in my lifetime, and that's good. So I think that we need to up it in that area. We need to also, in the meantime, also create alternatives. Pan-African Community Action, they've created I believe it's a monthly healthcare seminar screening, and it's in full service, but it is in the spirit of the Black Panther Party and other things. I think we have to create alternative programs in the meantime, and so we can soften the fall for those of us when this thing falls, because it's gonna fall.
Yeah.
I think we need coups. Regime change is a ridiculous phrase that's made up by the cousters, the CIA coup masters. I think we need to upset the regular running of this system as it is, because you have to have this, like the Swedish sabotage during World War II that was equally as important as combat. You have to stick wrenches in the works, right? In the first place, information. You have to speak up. You have to keep talking like this in spaces where now, as we're learning, the majority of people are gaining their information, not from the legacy media. They're still susceptible to all sorts of brain rot, but this information is out there. For example, we now know that you can't listen to anything that comes out of Israel in English. It's complete nonsense. Propaganda. If you want to even know what the Israelis are thinking, there are Hebrew language channels that are telling what people actually think and do. Now, you have to do that times infinity. Wait a minute, is this the guy? I had a friend, my godson, he was called me the other day. He says, I found this thing that says that China is against blah, 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 blah. And I said, what China? What are you talking? What is that? The Morning Post? Yeah, okay. That's okay, honey. That's not China. Okay. That is the standard opposition press in China. You have to look at, he said, well then give me some other links, and that's, I think, is healthy, that guys are in their 30s and they're starting to think like this. Listen to Professor Marani. He's in Tehran.
Yeah.
These people are accessible and reasonable and telling the truth despite all of the detriment of doing that.
Is we need to end capitalism. You can't have capitalism and then have nice relationships, mutually beneficial relationships with the rest of the world. We have to have solidarity with each other. We have to have solidarity with the countries that are under attack. People find all kinds of reasons to say they don't, and people don't know anything about Iran. Thanks to our corporate media and the war propaganda, people think they don't know anything about Iran. They think, well, it's a bad state, it's authoritarian, it's this, that. They have no clue. They know nothing about it. But even if that were true, the U.S. has no right to decide how Iran is run, who runs Iran, no right to attack that country militarily, none whatsoever. So people here must show solidarity and be anti-imperialist. It's not enough to be anti-war, because I see a lot of anti-war people, pro-peace people talking about how women are, well, I don't really like them. They don't treat women well. They know nothing about how women are treated in Iran. That most university students are women, for example. They have no clue. And so when Trump says some maniacal comment about they're cutting off babies' heads, they cut the women in half. I mean, it was just, those are the kinds of things that not only have to be rejected, but it shows you we must have solidarity with the people of Iran and with the state of Iran. Stand with Iran, period, end of discussion.